Well, I have Thomas Figarelle. He goes by Tom here on my podcast. I appreciate you coming on the Art Dealer Diaries. And actually, I talked to Larry Peterson. He said, "Oh, he's so dynamic. He'll be great." I said, "Great." So you got no pressure at all.
Oh, great. Well, you got to question Larry's judgment there, but yeah.
No, I think his judgment's really good. So,
Well, thanks. It's good to be here. I appreciate you having me.
yeah, no, it's fun. And so right now when we're taping this is middle of April. What's the weather like in Montana?
Well, while it is the middle of April, it feels more like the middle of February up here. We've got quite a bit of snow on the ground. It's about, 31, 32 degrees out. So a little cold. Fortunately, the wind's not blowing too bad, which is kind of a rarity in Great Falls this time of year.
Oh, well, I've got a long sleeve shirt on because of the air conditioning that is going on in my room.
Well, I wish we could have that problem here.
Yeah, mid 90s, low to mid 90s, I think most of the next week. Wow. So it's just as different as can possibly be.
Well, in this time of year in Montana, you never know what the weather's going to give you. We had a 70-degree day this time last week, so last Friday.
Wow.
And then it just turns back to winter. So it's kind of back and forth this time of year. The weather's not sure what it wants to be.
So when can you actually like plant gardens and things like that?
That's part of the kind of delicate balance around here in this part of the country, because it's planting gardens. You probably want to try to get it done around April. You want to start blowing out your sprinkler system and getting ready for some nicer weather. But if you get too far in front of that, you can have a hard freeze come in and wipe out any of the work you're doing. So it's kind of tough. It's kind of like threading the needle a little bit. Yeah, gosh, even here at the museum, when we're thinking about doing some of our plantings, it's just hoping that we get it in the right spot and we don't have another hard freeze like what we just had this week. So, usually, to answer your question, this time of year, but you're always kind of rolling the dice.
And so are there a lot of people that come to visit the C.M. Russell Museum this time of year, or is it kind of stay away until the trees start blooming?
We're just starting to pick up about this time of year. So like today, for instance, it's pretty busy. We'll probably have 60 to 70 visitors.
Oh yeah, that's really
good. Today is my guess. But in the summer, we'll have 200-300 visitors a day at certain points. So it starts to really pick up some steam about this time of year. People are getting out and exploring the country. But really, it's mid-May here that we start to hit a real high point, and that'll carry us through until early October.
And you're the executive director. That's your title.
That's right.
Yeah. So basically, you're you're responsible for everything, right?
Yeah. Keep the clocks around here. That's right.
Right. The buck falls with you, right?
Correct. That's right.
And so the museum, I want to get into the museum, but I want to find out a little bit more about how you ended up in the C.M. Russell. I've known a couple of people that have been at that museum. And interestingly enough, though, I'm going to be visiting it this summer to do my talk and to get the award you're giving me, but I've never been. So I'm kind of excited just to see it. Of course, I know a lot about Charlie Russell, but I'm going to learn a lot more between now and then. But so you grew up in Montana? Are you a Montana kid?
I did. In fact, this is my hometown. I grew up here in Great Falls.
Wow, that's so
I'm
cool.
blessed to call this place home.
Wow, that's really amazing. Did you always know that you would want to kind of stay in Great Falls?
No. In fact, I didn't want to stay in Great Falls. I think
okay,
like most people growing up
sounds like more normal. Okay.
Yeah. You grew up in your hometown, you want to leave, and I did. I left a couple of times, as a matter of fact, but my whole family's here. My wife's family's here, and there's, simply put, nowhere else better to raise a family than Great Falls, Montana. We have great schools, lots of great parks. Montana itself is gorgeous, and Great Falls is in the heart of it. It's the most genuine town in the state of Montana, because Montana, like much of the West, is changing quickly with lots of people moving in, and kind of a resort feel taking hold in many towns across the state, which isn't a bad thing per se. There's a lot of economic activity that comes with that, but you also lose a little bit of kind of like a degree of accessibility or like this hometown feel. Great Falls still has that, so it's a great place to be. We're really blessed to be here, and I'm really blessed to be able to serve a place like this. I mean, the museum is the crown jewel of Great Falls. And so, it's a true joy to be here as the executive director.
And some would say it's the true gem of Montana, I think.
Well, that's true. If not the American West, we'll go that far,
No, you could say that. I mean, I've
Yeah,
had enough
yeah.
people say that to me in the past, that they really do. When I tell them I haven't been to it, they're like, "Oh my God, I haven't gone to that museum. Are you really?" I go, "Well, I always want to go to the thing that they have in March, but it's our busiest time here and it's like 75. And then it always seems like it's cold and snowy there." So,
Well, those are smart people you're talking to. You keep
yeah.
good company. We're truly in Charlie's backyard. Our museum sits on the same city block and a half that was right behind Charlie and Nancy's place. So the home and studio are parts of our collection. We look at them as works that help tell and interpret the story of Charlie, unlike anything else. So, I mean, there's a lot of other museums that have really large Russell masterworks, and we have some of those in our collection too, but nobody else has the home and studio. And there's no better way to personally kind of get to know the two of them, Charlie and Nancy, than to walk through these spaces. So we kind of feel like we're on sacred ground in some respects, as far as Charlie's story is concerned. And we take great pride in being able to talk about him. I mean, we're the namesake of him, right? That's our role. But to talk about him on really personal terms. And so that's, I think, when you come here, Mark, something that we're really excited to present to you. And, certainly very, very little on Russell will be lost on you, but hopefully we can share a few new nuggets with you as well.
Oh no, there'll definitely be nuggets to be had. I mean, if nothing else, just, Dixon goes up there in 1917 to meet Russell and to spend time with him, because Dixon loved the fact that Russell was so good with costumes and clothing, and he had it right, and Dixon that was always a big bugaboo for him, to get it right. And one of the things I think he really respected and loved about Charlie Russell is not only did he get it right, but he lived with the people, right? I mean, he grew up, he was a cowboy in there early on and doing all these things. And Dixon respected somebody that would work as a cowboy, because he knew what that was and what that meant. So, for me, it will be, in a weird way, hollow ground via Dixon to come see
Yeah.
it.
No, that's very appropriate. And that's one thing we really like to tell people too, is that Charlie was a great mixer, and he didn't have a formal art education. So what he gleaned from people like Dixon and other artists that he were around, I mean, that shaped the way he worked. I mean, that influenced his technique, influenced the way his work developed on canvas. And so you really can't tell Charlie's story well or completely without talking about people like Dixon. So I think you're on point.
Yeah, no, and I'm going to cover some of that when I do give my lecture on Dixon about that. I'm going to specifically go into that. And I think it'll be interesting for the people at that hollowed ground, as we so to speak, to hear another guy's view of a man that ended up having a museum for him.
Well, that's right. And Mark, your perspective and expertise on Dixon is second to none. So I tell you, we're excited to have you here. Your educational symposium will be, I think, very enriching for our folks. And to have them hear about Dixon in that light, it's going to just elevate our education offerings, because we obviously focus on Russell, right, in most of our symposiums, and as we should. But to be able to have a different lens and a historic artist, to be the feature, I think it's just going to be good fun for everyone.
Yeah, and there's a lot of correlation there in many ways, and they've met on, I think, 3 different occasions too. So there was a bond there between those individuals for sure. And so it'll be fun. It'll be fun for me to do a little education on figuring out how deep that ran. I have an idea. I've read the letters and things, but yeah, it's interesting. But besides just talking about the museum, I actually want to talk a little bit about you, because one of the things I find interesting, and one of the reasons I like to do these podcasts, is I really want to know why people do what they do in the arts and why they dedicate their lives to it. And that's what you've done. That's what I've done. And so you grow up in Great Falls. What does your mom and dad do? What are they doing there?
Well, my mom, interestingly enough, was a 5th grade teacher. She was a teacher for 48 years total, but was a 5th grade teacher for about 32 of those 48 years. And that's significant because here at the museum, we have an annual essay contest. We've been doing it for 53 years. And so growing up, coming to the museum with my mom and her classes was just kind of this annual highlight. And she had a number of her students that won the essay contest through the years. And the prompt has somewhat changed over the years. It started out as, I like Charlie Russell because. Now students are asked to answer, Charlie Russell is important because. Bottom line, they're answering the simple question was, why is Charlie relevant today? And we have students come through our museum about, the month of January into February. We have about 1,000 students total do that. These are all the fifth graders here within the county. And so for me, it's kind of like this personal connection to the museum and to Charlie through my mom, who is a teacher. And I certainly owe her all of that interest. My dad was a contractor here in town, and he passed away about 11 or so years ago, but both my mom and dad grew up in farming families in the area. And at least my mom's dad, he had a picture of Charlie up in his wood shop. And I think he kind of had a kindred connection to Charlie. My grandfather would make some small wooden tractors and wagons. And that was a real, I think, passion project of his. And I think he was doing it in the spirit of trying to capture the West that was. And I think he saw that Charlie was doing the same thing. So it's this really fun family dynamic for me. And I think so many people that live in the Great Falls area or in greater Montana feel some sort of family connection to Charlie, whether they, had relatives that met him or not, or just simply can identify, certain aspects of Charlie and his psyche in, let's say, grandparents or aunts and uncles. So it's kind of a personal thing for me. And I think probably a lot of people in the Great Falls community can say that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So your mom's dad, he was from Great Falls too, and he had a picture of Charlie in his studio where he worked.
Yeah, he's from the area. So he actually, the little town that they ended up living towards the end of their life is Stanford. So that's out in the Judith Basin, about 60 miles east of Great Falls. Yeah, in his little wood shop, he had this picture of Charlie. And in the mid 80s, my grandpa had a little exhibition here of his wagons, which was good fun for our family. And I was pretty young at the time, but I can remember coming here and being part of the little exhibition opening that they had. And so that was just a great warm memory for our entire family.
And so your mom, did she start that essay contest?
She didn't, but she was really, I think one of the longer term fifth grade teachers that had their students participate in it. What's interesting is the lady who did start that essay is Norma Ashby, and Norma Ashby Smith now, but I'll have to introduce you to her when you're here, Mark. In fact, she might be someone you'd enjoy interviewing, but she not only founded the essay contest, but she founded our auction. So they started about the same time. It was late 1960s, and as a way to generate some attention and some funds for the museum, she felt both the auction and the essay contest were important things to introduce to the museum. And boy, they've been running strong for half a century, and Norma's been involved every year along the way. And not too many organizations, museums or otherwise, can say that they have someone like Norma, a true hometown leader that's been involved for that long.
And is it fifth graders that write this? Is it just from that grade, fifth graders?
It is just fifth graders. And then we have a panel of educators. Some of them themselves are former fifth grade teachers that grade the essays. So they'll read them, they'll evaluate them. We'll select a winner for each school, a winner for all of the city schools, and then a countywide winner as well. And then the city and countywide winners will read their essays. And then here in the museum, we keep all of the winning essays on display for the entire year. So you can see all of the different school winners, and then obviously, once again, the city and countywide winners. And with those essays are just small little note cards of some works of art that those same students have produced to complement their essay. So, Charlie, I think most people who appreciate him, right? He just wasn't a painter or a sculptor. He also, was an avid writer, writing particularly notes and illustrated letters to his close friends. So it's all so, appropriate that we would have these students match a little bit of their own artwork with some of their written word as a great way to memorialize and celebrate Charlie.
Well, one of the interesting things I found by doing this podcast and interviewing so many artists is that generally artists gets ignited somewhere in that like time frame when they're fifth grade, somewhere third grade to seventh grade. And it's winning a prize or being recognized by their art teacher or someone. And so what your mom did and what Irma did was that they made that ignition. And it would be very interesting to go back to all those people that have won and see how many of them may have actually gone into the arts. And I would even say maybe having your mom being involved in that ignited you to some extent. I don't know this, but I hope to find out here as I dig a little deeper. But have you guys ever looked back? I mean, I think it would be just a fantastic thing to see, because that what you're talking about is really, I think, incredibly important, and is, saying art is important. This is a big deal to our community. This is a big deal for this museum. And if you win this, you're something special in that field. Have they ever gone back and looked at those people?
Well, probably not as deeply as we should. And in fact, that is something that we've talked about before, is to have a reunion of essay winners. We have, on a kind of a case-by-case basis, had some touch points. For instance, the very first winner of the essay in 1969 is herself now a fifth grade teacher, but she's a fifth grade teacher in, of all places, Ankara, Turkey. She works at State Department school there. So she has started the fifth grade essay contest in Turkey to answer the same prompt and introduce her students to Charlie. And so without question, she was inspired, through her own experience as a fifth grade student, and is now introducing this same concept to her pupils. And, you're absolutely right. I'll tell you, Great Falls, for a town its size, has, I would say, a disproportionate number of professional artists in it. And I do absolutely attribute that to Charlie on some facet or form. Now, the essay contest is part of that formula. Other art museums in town are part of that too. Other Western artists who have, come through Great Falls. But, art begets artists, and artists beget more artists in so many respects. And so I think you're on point there, Mark. There's something that is kind of like passed down, a little bit in the community, in the larger Western art community for sure. But, certainly here in Great Falls, I think, some of us from Great Falls have kind of joked and called our community the Paris of the Plains.
Yeah, I get that.
Sometimes that's a little bit of a joke, but
no, I get
at the same time, there's some truth to it. We have a lot of art museums, we have a lot of artists, and it's all because of things like Charlie and the essay.
Yeah, I mean, you are an art colony in a weird way. You really are. I mean, you got a very significant museum that celebrates art and artists, and you grow up knowing that this is important as your culture. Your grandfather has Charlie's picture in his studio working. I mean, it's kind of ingrained into you that art, and to some extent probably Western art, but art is not only important, it's cherished. And so this is a very unique community, it sounds like to me. And I have no doubt that it affected you. It had to. Clearly you're part of the museum now. So when you're growing up in Great Falls, when you're, let's say, in high school, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do? Were you making art or doing art or reading or writing, or what were you involved in?
I was primarily involved in sports, but as silly as it sounds, I guess maybe my hobby was drawing baseball and football stadiums. I thought at one point that I would be an architect,
That's art.
because I was really motivated by just the idea of structures and how structures can lend themselves a degree of inspiration. And as someone who particularly loves baseball, baseball stadiums, baseball outfields, whether it be the grass or the orientation of the fence or a city skyline behind it. I mean, that's art, right? I mean, and that creates this like kind of cathedral in sports, unlike any other stadium or venue, right? I mean, football stadiums are unique. I love Notre Dame football, by the way, and Notre Dame Stadium is magical and spiritual, but nothing is like a baseball stadium, right? And there's, I think, something to do with like the horizon of a baseball stadium, particularly in the outfield, as I mentioned. And that's, I think, like Western art, you can't really disconnect a horizon from Western art. Especially Charlie, because he worked so much with light and worked so much with the topography here in central Montana in particular. I have thought in the past, like there's probably this like dotted line connection for my own interests between, Russell work that I saw and me just feeling like that's this like just innate type of inspiration that we as Westerners feel and should embrace as kind of like part of our cultural identity, and baseball stadiums, because they too have this own kind of unique horizon where action and life and the game is happening around you, but in the background is always this beautiful horizon. Generally speaking, you think about like Wrigley Field or PNC Park in Pittsburgh or Coors Field or Busch Stadium, just these great outfield arrangements and orientations. And just like baseball can inspire you in that way, certainly Western art does inspire us in that way too. And Charlie's work, I mean, he's got something going on in the foreground, but there, always present, is this gorgeous horizon with you as well. So I think there is some connection there on so many levels.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're drawing stadiums, I mean, that's definitely art and architecture, which I look at as being exactly the same. And so when you graduate from high school, that's in Great Falls, I assume?
Yep, at Charles M. Russell High School, in fact.
Charles M. Russell High School. Wow, that's so fantastic.
The only public high school, mind you, in Montana named after a person.
Wow. Well, I wonder how many high schools are out there that are named after artists. Not many.
That's a fair question. Maybe there's like a Homer Winslow Elementary somewhere.
Well,
There's actually a Charles M. Russell Elementary School in Missoula, Montana. But yeah, that's a great question, Mark. And I think part of Montana has really celebrated Charlie as its patron saint for decades. And so it's hard to drive around Montana and not see something with his name adorned on it.
Why do you think that is? Why are they so involved with this artist? What is it that makes him be the patron saint?
Well, gosh, that is a great question. I would be remiss if the first way I answer that is by giving the credit to Nancy, right? Nancy Russell.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
without Nancy, I don't know that Charlie's name and legacy would have spread nearly as far and wide as possible. Our former curator, Emily Wilson, said that Nancy took him from plains art to professional art. And I think that that's kind of true, right? I mean, and that's an easy read of Charlie's story for sure. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than certainly the important influence that Nancy had. I would say in so many respects, like it's the accessibility of Charlie, right? I mean, like he's just so human. He's someone who made his humor very available. He made his friendship very available. And you could see that, right? In part, the relationships he had with other artists like Dixon. Right. But also you could see it in some of his illustrated letters that he sent back and forth, and just in the ways people that spoke about him, right? And isn't that like probably the true indication of a great friend is how your friends speak about you? And I think that was Charlie. I think he was just a good friend to so many people. And, he made himself vulnerable to those friends. He made himself vulnerable to the larger Western public, ultimately, who has gotten to see his art, but also read, many of these illustrated letters and get a sense of just not only his talent as an artist, but also his thought as a person. And so, I think that has just made him incredibly endearing, and has made it where people can just kind of draw themselves close to Charlie and feel like in him they have someone they can really identify with. And last thing I'll say is, he's a pretty timeless guy, right? I mean, the things that he was capturing in his art were fairly radical for his day. I mean, we did an exhibition here a few years ago on the role that strong women played in his life. And, Nancy is one, their neighbor, Josephine Trigg, whose collection really founded our museum, is another, his mom. And all these women, most of their influence on him occurred before the passage of the 19th Amendment. Nancy was working deals with collectors around the country, and, didn't have the right to vote. So, he had this appreciation, I think, for a degree of inclusivity for women, certainly for indigenous figures, for wildlife, for the environment, that has really served well over the course of decades. And in some respects, and I'll say this is maybe kind of like a sad commentary, Charlie's kind of still a little bit of a radical today, because we are still struggling with some of those same things that Charlie and his day were struggling with in different manners, sure. But I think for all those reasons, Mark, Charlie's just this really fun, accessible, and good friend for so many Montanans and Westerners.
Yeah, I almost get the feeling that people embody themselves as Charlie Russell. In other words, they see Charlie Russell as Montana, and they see themselves as the person they would like to be as Charlie Russell. He's a guy who came out, in a time when it was very rough and rugged, and he's, working as a real cowboy, busting horses, doing all that stuff, then starts, drawing and gets, finds an aptitude and is good at it. So he makes a change and is able to go for something like that to an artist. And then, really becomes, through Nancy, a kind of a superstar on the world stage, at least in America, and probably more, quite frankly. And, he was Montana's probably first movie star, really, in the sense of, he was a celebrity. He was the celebrity, and continues to be that, which I find just amazing in so many ways, that, that an artist he's the Diego Rivera of, Montana. He really
Yes.
is, but a better one than Diego Rivera. No, Diego's a great painter, but he had his personal issues for sure. And I don't know if Charlie really did. I think Charlie was more, kind of straight and narrow, and, really, like you said, was accessible to people. And I just find this quite interesting. Is there a Charlie Russell Day or anything like that in Montana, or a holiday, or they celebrate his birthday or anything like that?
Well, we do a proclamation here during our March Western Art Week. And actually, it coincides with our essay. So we have a ceremony where the Russell essay contests are recognized, presented with some nice little awards. The winning essays are read, but then also the mayor of our city reads a proclamation announcing it as Western Art Week. And in that, recognizing Charlie's role as just this kind of central figure in our story as a community. There used to be a statewide proclamation, but then the state in the late 90s stopped that type of approach, where they weren't doing statewide proclamations for days or weeks or months like that. But that's still a big deal here in Great Falls. It's still this annual proclamation and really celebration of Charlie. And we're excited now that we can do that really twice a year, still in March, but now in August, in conjunction with our Russell exhibition and sale, which, the COVID pandemic shifted for us, but hey, it gives us another reason to celebrate Charlie and his timelessness, 2 times a year, which is really important for us.
And do you think Charlie Russell is seen in the other parts of Montana with this same kind of, patron saint kind of a thing? And in other words, could you be a congressman in Montana and not know who Charlie Russell is?
Well, if you are a congressman in Montana and you don't know who Charlie Russell is, you shouldn't be in office. I'll say.
There you go. Okay.
I'll say that. Yeah, that's a good question, and I would say yes. I mean, and I'll answer it in kind of these specifics. The McKay collection is this really large collection of very significant and important Russell works, and it's within the State Historical Society's collection in Helena. So, oftentimes when we're meeting people throughout the state, particularly new residents to Montana, they'll say, "Oh yeah, you guys have 2 museums, right? One in Great Falls and one in Helena." And I usually will just take credit and make them assume that that's our museum too. But no. I obviously need to correct them a little bit. Say, well, that's the historical societies, but that's such an important collection, and it's so important to the historical society, and they celebrate Charlie, that people just see that as really kind of a primary part of their mission. And they do some wonderful things. They're such a great and strong partner and asset for Montana, but they celebrate Charlie, right? And I think that is known in that Helena community. Kalispell, the Flathead Valley, Charlie and Nancy had a place up in Glacier. I think maybe Maynard Dixon visited Bullhead Lodge up in Lake McDonald.
Yep, that's where he went.
Okay. Yep. So, lots of folks in the Flathead, love Western art and appreciate Charlie's connection to Glacier. And so, he really does stretch far and wide throughout Montana. And, I shouldn't forget the Judith Basin. Now, there's no larger Montana city in the Judith Basin area, but I tell you, um, you'll never find a group of people and a series of communities more proud of an adopted son than people in the Judith Basin are of Charlie, right? He arrived there when he was 16 and lived there, for about 8 or so years, I think, if I've got my chronological order here right. But boy, people still there think, yeah, he's a son of the Judith Basin, and they are so immensely proud of him, and as they should be. So, Charlie has that deep and wide connection for Montana. You're probably aware, and maybe some of your listeners are, but there's 2 statues in Statutory Hall in
Right.
the U.S. Capitol for
Right.
each state, and Montana has Charlie as one of the 2, and he's the only artist in the U.S. Capitol. And so, even Montanans that are out there, usually you'll see some photos or selfies of someone standing next to Charlie and his palette. So that's always good fun too.
Yeah, that's amazing. Though I think Goldwater is in there, and some of us would go, well, he was a good photographer.
That's true. He absolutely was. He absolutely was.
Yeah, so he's in there. Deborah Copenhaver Fellows did that sculpture of him, and he's in the rotunda in Washington, which is pretty interesting. So, and he probably would have liked Charlie Russell. He probably did know all about Charlie Russell. In fact, I'm sure
I can imagine. Yeah. From what, my sense of Goldwater's story is he probably would have found some real kind of unified souls there together.
Yeah, well, I know he loved Dixon. Goldwater loved Dixon. He liked Ed Mell's work. He was a Westerner for sure. So when you go to college, where do you go to college? I know I'm kind of jumping back, but I still want to get the whole story of how you kind of got into where you are now.
Oh, sure. Well, now that we're getting into college, we're getting into some of the really good stories.
Yeah.
So people should listen to this after 11 p.m. and then we'll. No, I went to the University of Montana for undergrad, and then have a graduate degree from the University of Southern California. Don't tell any of my Notre Dame friends that, but
And what was your degree in?
Political science. It was my undergrad degree, and then a master's in teaching social science from SC. So, didn't necessarily ever, start down. Well, I shouldn't say not necessarily. I didn't start down a track with the end goal in mind of, working at a museum or either that or the Charlie Russell Museum, but was always very much interested in history and social science. And so thought, at some point, maybe I would, teach government or civics in, a high school setting, at some point. And, social science really is a study of us, right? And, I would say, I would make an argument here that maybe Charlie was a bit of a social scientist himself, because his work was the painting of us, was the painting of the West that was changing. And, he was capturing, the essence of what was through the stories he heard, or maybe some of the compositions featured some, scenes that he had seen, certainly in Montana and the West. But, that is social science, right? I mean, it's just getting down people and thoughts and saving them for posterity. So, there's an opportunity to make future commentary around them. And so I think that's in many respects what continued to draw me to Charlie. You brought up Barry Goldwater, another US Senator, I would say, who probably had a deep affinity for Charlie, who actually I know had a deep affinity for Charlie, was Mike Mansfield. Mansfield was our senior senator here in Montana for a number of years. I think still now, maybe Mitch McConnell's getting close, but Mansfield was the longest serving Senate majority leader in American history. I think McConnell might be getting close to superseding that record. But, Mansfield was from Great Falls, spent a lot of time at the university, and I was always a real fan of Mike Mansfield, still am. And there's a real, similar kind of like earthiness to Russell and Mansfield, and they would have certainly had some connection. So when I found myself at the university writing and reading about Mansfield, it's an easy transition to kind of go back to your core of Charlie, and to think about the commonalities those two men had, though they led very different lives. But to kind of answer your question, that journey kind of took me towards more, focused on, just getting my education, thinking I would maybe become a high school teacher at that point, but then working in some nonprofits, both in the university system, and then ultimately in a couple other charities here in Montana. So really, my professional background is more in nonprofit administration than it is in arts. Though I love art, and it's been on some level a part of my life, and Charlie's story certainly has influenced my life and my thinking. But really, professionally, I'm more of a nonprofit administrator than anything else. So my job here is always to stay out of the way of people who really know what they're doing, like the curators and
Right.
preparators, and our education team who are delivering our programming and creating, exhibitions and narratives that share and celebrate Western art. And I get the fun duty of being able to raise some funds, make some friends for the museum, make sure that our operations are functional and operating optimally, and just get to talk to good people like you along the way.
Yeah, it seems like museums are going in that direction, that really they recognize it's a business, right? And that you need to have a good director who can do the financial aspects. I'm not sure having a BFA or being an artist is a necessary thing that you have to click off to become an executive director of any museum. In fact, it seems like it's more doing what you have done with working with nonprofits seems like a more important skill set to have, and of course a love of art. You have to have that too. I think I don't. Oh, I don't.
Yeah,
Can't
you
imagine
absolutely do.
why you would take a job at an art museum otherwise if you didn't.
Well, and no one's going to want to support the museum if the person in charge doesn't truly love and feel excited about the mission.
Yeah.
And I certainly, have the good fortune of sharing that real affinity for Charlie and for what we're doing here.
So you're doing nonprofits, and then what happens? Do you take a job working with a museum or do you go, is it in 2016 is when you started this? Was there any gap? Did you do some things in between those timeframes?
Well, that's a good question, Mark. I mean, that's kind of part of this little interesting story. I was the vice president of development for Special Olympics Montana, and had met a couple of folks who ultimately, I didn't realize it at the time, were nonprofit consultants. And I think when I first met them, they were not contracted with the museum here, but they eventually would contract with the museum to do a variety of different things. And one of them was to conduct an executive search. And so I think when they exhausted all good options, they then came to me and said, would you be interested in this, at least in interviewing or learning more? And I was. I mean, this, as we noted, is such a crown jewel in the state and such a source of pride for our Great Falls home. I was both confused as to why they were talking to me, but also excited at the same time. But I had to tell them something. I said, you need to know I'm going to Afghanistan for a year. I'm a part of the National Guard here in Montana. And, I kind of thought that might just, respectfully end that conversation. I would have, hey, no harm, no foul, totally would have understood. And, I think the initial reaction was, yeah, I mean, it might create some challenges, but, a credit to the board of directors here, they were still willing to have that conversation, and even more credit to them that they were willing to take a chance on me, not having that like real classical art background, but then also taking a chance on me knowing that after about 9 months of working here, I would need to leave to go to Afghanistan for about a year. And so, Mr. Tom Petrie, who was our board chair at the time, who he himself has a background in the Army, I think he had a certain, personal appreciation for that. He had that empathy of what that's like to have to
Yeah, I get it.
go somewhere. I think he was in Vietnam for about a year. And so, he said, yeah, let's venture forward. And so I came on board and then left for a little bit, but the museum continued to obviously function very well without me. And that, once again, big credit to Mr. Petrie and the entire board who stepped up along with our really talented staff and did such good work in that interim. So That's maybe more than you bargained for in that answer there,
No,
Mark.
well, I think that's very important to go down that road actually and find out some of that. Well, it says a lot about your board. It says a lot about Petrie. It says a lot about, your respect for their respect for military service. I get it. I was active duty myself for 4 years.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. But I didn't have to go to Afghanistan. I just missed out on the first, Desert Storm by literally months. So I'm very appreciative of people who had to do that. So what was your role when you were in Afghanistan? What were you doing?
I was the S3, or the operations officer of a battalion, and we're a combat sustainment support battalion, and we worked directly for the 101st Airborne Division. So at that time, the 101st had authority over the whole country. So the US 4 Alpha commander was the 2-star division commander from the 101st Airborne. So we had really 3 lines of effort. One was to provide train, assist, and advise capacity to the Afghan National Army, specifically with logistics, and really specifically fuel. And then our next line of effort was to provide contract oversight to about $800 million worth of various life support related contracts throughout the country. And we mainly focused in like the northern 2/3 of the country. But that took a lot of time and energy, and spread our people throughout Afghanistan in various locations. And then our final mission was to do sustainment support on Bagram, which was the major US military installation in that country. So we ran the main point for all ordnance, supplies, materials, and made sure those got dispatched throughout the country effectively. So it was an interesting mission. It was really aside from being away from my family, it was actually fun. It was awesome, to be honest with you. I mean, missed home, missed my kids and my wife, obviously. I think they generally missed me. But it was fun. Besides that, it was different. And we put on the only Western art exhibition I think that the country of Afghanistan maybe ever had, in November of 2018, in conjunction with Native American Heritage Month, which the Department of Defense does every year. We decided we'd get a few Russell images emailed over, and we printed them out on large plotters, which we'd use for maps and things like that. But
Right.
we printed them out on the plotters and mounted them on some cardboard, and it was kind of, it was a little crude, but it got the job done.
So what did you do? Did you have a showing of the images in?
We did. Yeah, we've found some tripods that we would use for briefings, where we put some map boards on. So we just turned them into tripods to display art. I asked our curatorial team here to ship over some small little text panels that would accompany the various items that were all from our permanent collection here at the museum. And yeah, so we printed them off and displayed them, and had a little exhibition opening, and had some of the brass there in Bagram come through and take a look at it. And I read a couple of things that our curators had written for me. And, it was fun. It was fun. Hopefully the Taliban are taking good care of those Russell reproductions that I'm sure they are really fascinated by. But yeah, it was great. It was a great memory overall. And we got to share a little bit of the American West with, people in the military from around the country. And, we had a bunch of NATO and coalition partners there too. And they loved it as well. So it was good fun. As you could appreciate from your own military experience, you meet a menagerie group of folks, right?
Yeah.
In these journeys you have. And so, if you can share a little bit of Charlie and share a little bit about the West, you feel like you've done something to kind of lighten their life a little bit.
I bet it was more than fun. I bet it brought something deeper to you, honestly, because, you're a Montana, native Montana, as your, it's your heritage, that you're the executive director of that museum. You are bringing, I would even say, it wouldn't surprise me if you teared up at 1 or 2 times in that when you're showing that.
Yeah, it felt like a little bit of home.
Yeah, I bet.
In this, the strange chaos of Afghanistan. So yeah, it was real personal. It absolutely was. You cut to the heart of that, Mark. It was really special.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think it would be almost when you and when it's over, you still got those images around that are, I don't know if I want to use the word haunting, but in a weird way, they are haunting you because that's home. That's everything you are, right?
Well, it totally. And, I couldn't help but think about that. Was it, last summer, right? When we were all watching the images on TV of Afghanistan quickly collapsing, right? And the Taliban just sweeping through.
Right.
And when I woke up one morning and saw that the Taliban had taken control of Bagram, I thought to myself, I know exactly where those images are.
Right.
Because in fact, so the 101st, which we reported to, they left about the same time we did, and first ID was coming in. And so one of the staff officers from a brigade within the first infantry division, I said, hey, you got some Russell images here. When November comes around, you're going to need to do something for Native American Heritage Week, or month. You should want to do something. And, I'd take these out, I'd set them back up because it'll be a whole new group of people.
Right.
And, I don't know if they did or not, but I do know that closet had a bunch of stuff in it from like 10 years prior. So I thought, you know what, I bet that closet never was cleaned out. And when, our forces rolled out, you saw how much material was demilitarized and left. And I thought, I can't imagine they would have taken those Russell images. So I can imagine that someone from the Taliban probably would have opened up that closet, taken a look at these and thought, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
I hope they like them. Hope they're enjoying it.
Yeah. See, they still have importance to you. I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do. I mean,
they do
copies, but they have real importance to you. And you were concerned and thinking, where are they and what are they doing with them? And that represents America. The heart of America
does.
actually.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not to get too philosophical about it, but like art is just it's an expression of freedom, right? I mean, it is part of a liberty that makes the place we live so special. It makes why you would want to go to a place like Afghanistan. It adds additional layers of meaning, right? Because we get to live in a place that you can paint and produce work that inspires you without fear or embarrassment, right? And there's not a lot of places in the world that you've got that. And in fact, not to get too off track here, but I was really interested by art in Afghanistan. You go to bazaars, like in Kabul, for instance, there's a lot of big bazaars around, but there's one in Kabul in particular, pretty close to the US Embassy. It just seemed to be a little bit better than the other bazaars. And you got a whole bunch of different things in there. You can buy, cheap electronics, most of it knockoff stuff, right? You can get a tailored suit, but you could also buy Afghan art. And very few pieces in this, Afghan art collection had people in it. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. It was a lot of landscape stuff. And at first that didn't really catch me, but after, being there for a number of months, I asked this gentleman who was kind of like the proprietor, I said, is landscape art just the art of Afghanistan? And, he told me a story that when the Taliban swept through in the 1990s, they put a prohibition on any art that featured the human form, that didn't fit with their interpretation of Islam, right? Their very fundamentalist approach to Islam. So they started destroying works of art that had any human figure in it. And I was just really interested by that. And he said, well, you need to look up and read about that because there's even a deeper story. And I can't remember this gentleman's name offhand. I should find this story and give it to you. This gentleman was a physician in Kabul I think it was the mid 1990s. And he had a sense that the Afghan National Gallery's collection would be destroyed.
Yeah.
So he went down there with some artist friends that he knew, and they painted over the top of all of these very significant pieces within the Afghan National Collection for the sake of kind of sanitizing them for the Taliban. So the Taliban would come in, see those items and think, well, they're okay. Well, fast forward a few years, the Taliban are overthrown right after, we invade shortly after 9/11. And this group led by this gentleman think, hey, it's okay to probably bring these pieces back out again. So they carefully remove all of the the work that they have done on these canvases to reveal the original artwork again. And so, it's just interesting. Art, it really, it identifies our story as people, right? It's kind of go back to the social science aspect of it. It memorializes our stories. It captures ideas. It unifies people together. And only does that really happen in free societies. And, Afghan, art, right, has seen its peril, and it probably is at risk again right now. Although I think there is some moderation in the Taliban today versus 20 some years ago. But boy, it's all that much more, all that many more reasons why we should just really appreciate where we get to live and the kind of art that we get to celebrate.
Yeah, I think lots of cultures over the millennium have destroyed other people's art because it's a way of cutting to the core of that humanity and that culture.
Yeah.
And I knew when I saw when the Afghan Taliban was destroying the big sculptures, these monumental sculptures carved out of a
The
side.
Buddhist Sabamian.
Yeah. I just thought, man, that's the end of, that's the end of the culture for them. And it was not long after that, things kind of spiraled down. So it's interesting. We don't realize, I think, or it's not generally realized how important art is in making statements, emotional, political, cultural statements of who we are and what we are. Charlie Russell is one of those, right?
Totally.
I mean, if you wanted to destroy what Montana is, you go in and destroy Charlie Russell's stuff. And that cuts to the heart of, who you are as a people, who you are as a culture, how you see yourself. You can imagine how angry that people would be if even one piece was destroyed.
Yeah, no, that's right. Especially, you're absolutely, especially for someone like Charlie, right? Who like kind of embodies the West, the definition of the West that we have, in Montana. And, not to bring it around too much to geopolitics again, right? But that's happening in Ukraine, right? I mean, there are stories of entire collections being destroyed in Ukraine because they feature predominantly Ukrainian artists. And, you have incredibly valiant groups of people. A lot of them are staffs of museums in Ukraine right now, whether they be curators, board members, preparators, artists themselves that are trying to save sculpture, trying to move collections out of the country, trying to take things underground and risking their own lives in the process, because those art collections are targets for, Russian activity, right? Yeah. Because they know, right, if you want to hurt the psyche of a country, you go after the art and culture of it. And so, I mean, it's an unfortunate reality, but it does speak to how critically important art is for our identities as people.
Right. I saw a beautiful picture of a man doing a plein air painting of the bombed out kind of buildings, but he was out there just doing because he's an artist, right? He needs to be painting. He needs to be doing his thing. And he's, what's in front of him now is not beautiful buildings, but damaged ones. And it was amazing. I thought, wow, artists have to do what they have to do, whether taking a cello and playing in the middle of the area what's bombed out or somebody painting. So what do you think you learned, or took away from that military experience to what you do today as, you're in your job as an executive director? Because I'm sure there must have been some takeaways that you saw the world a little differently, or how you do logistics and things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I don't know if I fully know that yet, to be honest with you. My wife's asked me that actually a couple of times.
Then I know it was a good question. If your wife has asked that same question.
And we do little periodic health checks, right, in the military. And so you visit with a counselor just once a year, and they, ask you how you doing. And actually that question has come up. And just to be honest with you, I don't know entirely. I'll tell you a couple of things that, and I'm not that close to it. I guess, as I came back in 2019, which is, it's crazy to think it feels like 5 minutes ago. It's crazy to think, that, a couple of years have passed, a few years have passed since. But, I think what it comes down to is that, whether it's, war or a museum, at the end of the day, it's people, right? I mean, we spend a lot of time working with contractors who don't report to us, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we might evaluate their contract performance, but at the end of the day, they can tell me or tell our soldiers who are evaluating these contractors in Afghanistan, they can tell us to go take a hike, right? And some of them did. Um, the Afghan National Army guys that we were trying to give some pointers on some fuel operations, they didn't really work for us either. But it's all about influencing people in a way that they feel empowered. And I mean, that's ultimately how anything happens anywhere, right? Whether it be like a museum, a school, the military is, do people really feel empowered to live their own best life? And, if they do, they can do incredible things and you can work with them to achieve something pretty special. And, I think certainly that's one thing that stood out to me, there is, I'm a member of the National Guard, but working with a lot of active duty folks, but you just kind of all work together, but you kind of feel empowered to do what you think you need to achieve, a unified goal. It's the same here in a museum where we have a board from around the country. We have patrons from around the country. We have artists who have different agendas and interests. And sometimes those are competing interests. Sometimes, our board's interests compete with each other or with our, priorities as a staff, but we all have to come together to kind of feel unified on a central thing, whether that be an exhibition or like a big campaign, which we're in presently at the museum. Y'all just kind of got to pull together as people to do something. And if people feel empowered and respected, they'll be emboldened to do really special things. And so, I guess that's one common factor that kind of like sticks out in my mind, but that's maybe not a thought mark that I've probably like explored enough in some respects.
Yeah, it's probably there subconsciously. You're dreaming about it and thinking about it in those terms, but I'm sure you have thought about it. It may just not be, as you said, consciously, because
Yeah.
I mean, you absorb all that stuff that you experienced and what you had to do and the things that were required for you to do your job and to survive and to try to, you have the bigger goal of trying to help, your country, that stuff sticks. So, and I'm sure it goes and affects you on how you look at the big picture of a museum too, and what you want to leave. Because I'm sure you want to leave a legacy too. I mean, that's your home place where you grew up and where your parents were from, and you have, it's your country as well, just Great Falls and the museum, I would think.
Yeah. No, it is. Besides having an opportunity to just live in a place that's very familiar, that feels like home. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a place where there's a different type of pride that you feel when you're in your hometown and you want to be in your hometown. And,
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm so blessed to be
Yeah.
able to say that that's something I get to do.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk just a little bit as we finish up about what you have coming up in August, because that sounds, for people who may not know about your big event, what it entails, who's coming, how can people go to it, and that kind of thing.
Well, first and foremost, we get to honor this guy. I don't know if you know him, Dr. Mark Sublette. Heck of a good guy. I'm excited to meet you in person,
Yeah.
Mark.
Okay.
But the Russell Western Heritage Awards have been for us such a special way to celebrate the American West and people who make a tremendous contribution and create for themselves a legacy for the West in the spirit of Charlie. So, Mark, thank you for allowing us to recognize you and honor your body of work. That's going to make such a special evening for us here in Great Falls, and that really does kick off all of our events. So, to answer, part of your question, we run from Thursday, August 18th through Saturday, August 20th, and it starts Thursday. We have an open house, a preview party is what we call it, for all of our auction art, and these are contemporary works from living artists as well as historic works from folks, obviously like Charlie, that we offer as consignments within our auction, and that combined with the Russell Western Heritage Awards on Thursday caps off a really great day to start the 3-day event. Friday, we have what we call Art in Action. It's a quick draw, quick finish style format. And those are fun. That is in so many respects kind of like a fan favorite here in Great Falls, because people get to interact with the artists as they're producing their work. So, there's conversations about technique, there's conversations about the creative process, there's bad jokes, there's just, good fun that goes on, people reconnecting with old friends. So that's just a really good one. We've done it year in and year out at the Metal Art Country Club here in Great Falls, which is a beautiful club. It's a club that Charlie and Nancy were actually members of. So it's been in Great Falls since 1917.
Mm.
And we're going to do part of it this year outside on the 18th green, which will be, well, right off the 18th green, I should say. We're not going to be on the green, but it'll be beautiful right on the Missouri River. People will really enjoy that. And then that takes us to kind of what is going to be for us a new high point. And really, we're changing the game in which we've done, the auction for the past 53 years. And we're changing it by this way. We're taking our auction, the 2-night event, which people are accustomed to, and putting it in the Montana Expo Park, which is the largest event venue we have here in Great Falls, one of the largest in Montana. And we're combining that auction with about 150 artist suites. So we have welcomed and invited every single artist that we've juried into our show to set up a booth and to offer original works for sale there in that same venue. So under one roof, we will have about 150 artists along with our great sale. The space in itself will be absolutely transformed and made into this very elegant but truly Western environment where we get to celebrate the art and soul of the American West and Charlie Russell with living artists today. So it'll be good fun. It'll be a very memorable experience. It'll be an auction unlike anything we've ever done. And we believe this is setting a new course for the Russell exhibition and sale, which Larry Lynn Peterson, our board chair, calls, and rightly so, the granddaddy of all Western art auctions. I mean, the Russell really started all of them. Others have cropped up and have done great, big, wonderful things. But we are the original. We're an auction that celebrates art and artists unlike anywhere else. So if you truly love the American West and you want to celebrate it in the spirit of Charlie, there's nowhere else you want to be than in Great Falls this August.
And that's the 20th when you have the auction and the 150 artists that are going to be in the pavilion. That's the 20th.
I'm glad you asked. So we'll have the artists there the 18th through the 21st, in fact.
I see.
On the 19th and 20th, so Friday and Saturday night is when we'll have the auction. So
I see.
Friday night's auction we call First Strike, and that is exclusively contemporary works by living artists. And Saturday night is a combination of contemporary Western work with historic offerings as well. So it's a 2-night event, and it's really good fun.
And I think I'm going to give a lecture on Dixon on like the 20th, that's Saturday, I guess.
That's right. And that'll be at the Montana Expo Park as well.
Nice.
We're working on a 10 a.m. schedule for educational symposium. And that'll be fun too, Mark. What we've set it up so we'll have the educational space right in all of the artist suites. So as people are listening to your symposium, we'll have artists coming out of their booths and just taking it in as well. And that's something we've never done before either. We've always had our symposium at a gallery here in the museum, separate from our event. But you know what? We want it to all be together in the sense of kind of unity, because that's really what we're trying to get to. People bringing it back to the core essence of why Western art matters and why, our world should take notice of great Western artists today. And so the symposium will be great fun. That's Saturday the 20th at 10 a.m.
Excellent. And so if people want to attend, one, I know they need to start making hotel reservations soon because they're all going to go away, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And two, can they go to your website and get tickets and find out more information?
That's right. So we would encourage people to go to cmrussell.org. You can see some sliders on our front website that rotate. You'll see one on the Russell. You can also click on the events tab at the top, or you can look for the Russell icon that floats on the screen. We've just kept that Russell skull icon on every page and it floats there. So if folks click on that, it'll give more information on the auction, a run of events. And they can also call 406-727-8787. And that's our main line. And you can ask for more information.
And they can also go to this podcast because we'll put it up, all those links and those numbers and things. So if they're going and watching this on YouTube, you can get all that information as well. And
That's right.
I know I'm thrilled to and honored beyond belief to get the Western Heritage Award. It's just amazing. It's, you know, I'm still surprised and shocked because it's such an amazing group of individuals who have received it. And so that for me is going to be you know, clearly I'll have a special place with Charlie Russell now in my heart too. I can tell you that.
Well, thank you, Mark. And, you know, you're in due and appropriate company.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. So I'm so thrilled that you took the time to talk to me today and, you know, just kind of let us know, you know, who you are and what you are and how special this museum is and how special Great Falls is, which another thing I'm really looking forward to is just kind of getting to see that city and the people that make up such a unique bunch of Western individuals. So it's really it was an honor to get to talk to you and spend time with you. And next time I see you will be in August and I'll get to see you in person.
Well, I look forward to it, Mark. And I'm so privileged to have been on this this podcast. You have a great show here, and you know, thanks for covering our event. And yeah, we really look forward to meeting you in person here in August.
Yeah, and I'm looking so forward to getting to meet Larry in person too. I had a podcast with him on, so if people want to find out about, he's a great writer, Larry Peterson.
He is.
Yeah, he really is. He put out an amazing.
You know, I have to give a quick shout out to Larry. You know, I mentioned Mr. Petrie earlier. You know, we've been so fortunate to have just this lineage of great leaders here at the museum, and you know, Tom Petrie, Jim Peterson now. Larry Lynn Peterson, boy, have really led the way for us. And, you know, a lot of folks, I think, know, you know, our event is usually in March, right? Well,
Right.
March 2020 rolls around and, you know, the whole world looked at the pandemic square in the face and had to make some big decisions. And it's because of, you know, Larry, like yourself, as a physician, and he understood what this was and gave some sage counsel to our entire board, which really ultimately led to us making some very strong decisions along the way. We were the very first event to reschedule as a result of the pandemic, and that credit goes to Larry and his boldness and you know, just his shrewd insights on what we were facing. We're just so fortunate to have him as our leader and to enjoy him as an amazing writer and just a truly treasured scholar of Russell's work.
Yeah, he really is. Yep, it's going to be fun. I'm excited. And it's only, what is it, like 5 months away or something?
That's right. That's right.
All right.
Feels like 5 minutes away. So we look forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you in the future, which is coming up soon. All right.
You as well. Thank you, Mark.
All right. All right. Bye-bye. Go enjoy. Go get your snowplow out.
Yeah, I need to.